our ingredients for our steamed brown bread are 3 different types of flour or meal for this thirded bread recipe. We have whole wheat flour, dark rye flour, and some coarse cornmeal. You can use a medium or a coarse grind on this. You just don't want a really fine grind because you'll give it some great texture to the bread with the medium or coarse meal. So then we will also have baking soda, some salt, and then for our wet ingredients, we're gonna use buttermilk and molasses. And we'll be mixing our baking soda in with 3 tablespoons measured out in this cup of warm water. Now you will also need some kind of grease for your cans that you'll be steaming the bread in. So I'll be using Crisco. Then for our tools and supplies, I'm gonna start, of course, we have our cans all clean, ready to go. They have not been greased yet, but those are 29-ounce tomato sauce cans. You can use any size can for this recipe as long as you have a vessel that they will fit inside to steam. Now we'll also need aluminum foil for 2 different things. We're gonna cover the tops of our cans to hold that steam in there and cook the bread for us. But I've also made sort of a little riser with them because I don't have a rack that will fit inside this pot. You do need to elevate the cans as they are steaming. So I created sort of a little base level here and my cans will all fit nicely in there. I'll show you that once they're ready to go. And they will steam in there with a level of water just above those little balls of aluminum. Now, as that water cooks off, you will need to refill it. So you want to have a tea kettle or some way to have some extra hot water on hand as this boils off. And of course, to actually mix our bread, I have my stand mixer. We have a few different measuring. We have a teaspoon and a tablespoon. You also need a 1/3 cup measure and a 1 cup measure. Now our first step was creating this rack with my aluminum balls to elevate those cans. The second step is to cover those with a layer of water. Oops. Have to fix them and readjust once the cans goes in, but you want to make sure they're covered just to the top. And these are going to float, I think, a little bit on me before they have the cans on top. And you want to get this to start boiling so it's ready as soon as our bread is in the cans. So I'm going to turn this on. I'm going to cover it. And we'll get this going. And then we'll move over to greasing our molds. So now that our pot has been turned on to boil, it's going to get going in there in a little bit. I've also preemptively filled my tea kettle and I'll put that into its position for my refills that this pot is going to need as those breads steam. Now we're going to prepare our molds. So I'm going to use vegetable shortening to grease my molds. Just a little square of paper towel. And make sure they're really well greased so that when it's time, that bread can come out really easily. So you want to get in all those nooks and crannies in this ridged kind of can that we have, already making a mess. I'm going to do the other 3 that I have here, and then we will start making the bread. So now we're going to put together some of our dry ingredients. We need 2 cups of our whole rye meal. It's this one. We need 2 cups of our rye meal. Pour that in. We're going to get these going. Make a huge mess. Get the dry ingredients going in the mixer. 1. And 2. We also need 2 cups of our cornmeal. One. Two. Next, we need 1 cup of our whole wheat flour. One whole cup of our whole wheat flour, and with those we need to add in our 2 teaspoons of salt. One and 2. I'm just going to quickly sort of whisk these together to get them going. Now we're going to start combining our wet ingredients to then add them to the dry. So there's a couple steps in here. We need 4 cups of buttermilk. As an alternative, if you don't have buttermilk, you can mix together yogurt and milk to make a sort of soured milk. Luckily, I had just enough buttermilk, so I have 4 cups, and we're going to add to this 1/3 cup of molasses. Nice gentle whisk. Try to get that molasses to start combining. So we've got the molasses and buttermilk ready to go. Next, I'm just going to measure out 3 tablespoons of warm water. And we need 2 teaspoons baking soda. Give those a little whisk together to get them to combine as well. And then we're going to put them into our mixer. So I'm going to get this going. On stir on the lowest setting. Into our mixer. Going to go the buttermilk and molasses. And then baking soda and water. That looks pretty well combined. We'll scrape that down, and next step is to get it into our molds. Now I have my mix and my molds. We're gonna fill these to about 3/4 full. So luckily I have some nice lines on here to help me sort of measure it out. I am going to use my measuring cup just to help me do this a little more neatly. Just wanna make sure they're all even so that they cook at the same rate. It looks like my molds are more like half full than 3/4 full. And now our molds are ready to be covered. That's our next step. So I'm gonna grab my aluminum foil and we'll start that. So I pre-cut some pieces of aluminum foil. I tested to make sure it was the right size with one of them. And all you want to do is make sure it's large enough so that you can crimp. So you want to lay it down loosely at first, crimp around the edges so you have sort of a seal, and then press down the edges to sort of hold it all in place. So I'm going to lay this one down. So you can see I already did this. Like I said, just lay it down loose at first and crimp all around the edge. And then once you have a good crimp, just sort of press it down. First mold ready to go. 3 more. 4 cans are ready to steam. Now we'll set the cans in place very carefully. They'll sort of work together and keep each other standing. Sort of squish them down, make sure they're not gonna wiggle around too much. We'll get the cover on. I just set my timer for 20 minutes just because I think I'm gonna have to check on these pretty often, and I wanna make sure they don't run out of water. And now we wait. It's been just about an hour. I've done 1 refill of the water. I'm about to do 1 more. Take this top off pretty carefully. I have my kettle here, nice hot water, and just take the top off and refill so you're just above that line where your rack or your aluminum foil balls sit. Now it should be good for another 20 to 25 minutes, and then I'll give it a little bit more. All right, so it's been about an hour and 15 minutes. I'm gonna take 1 out and just see sort of where they're at, because this is sort of a check and see kind of thing. Not knowing exactly how long they'll need to steam all the way through. So I'm gonna grab one very carefully, pop them out, cover the rest back up, and then carefully take this cover off, and I will check the doneness with a knife, see where we're at. Ooh. That knife is clean. We're done. Shut it off, uncover. I'm gonna take them out and grab a cooling rack to set them all on. My half-filled 29-ounce cans took a total of an hour and 15 minutes. I'm gonna allow these to cool before I try to remove them. So we'll check back on them in about, I would say 15, 20 minutes to let them cool down. I wanted to make sure it would work. I just got my first one out. They're still pretty warm, but I want to give them a chance to cool out of the can. So this is kind of the fun part. Since I took my aluminum covers off already, I am using my little beeswax wrap that I have, and it's helping me kind of grip the can because it's got the beeswax on it. Just give it a little shake. Hear it moving around. It's ready to go. And there we go. Comes out nice and clean. Our bread has cooled a bit. It's time to slice and taste. It's nicely baked through. Can sort of tell that some of my meals maybe didn't combine all the way through, but I think they did pretty well. Still a little warm. Let's give this a try. Very tasty, very dense. It's pretty savory, nice and salty. I think it would be great butter and jam to sort of offset it for a sweet meal. I am gonna save one of these to pair with our baked beans and some hot dogs for traditional Saturday night supper. But I think we'll eat the rest of them for breakfast. 24 hours before you want to begin cooking your beans, you need to rinse and then soak them. So first step, have a colander. We're going to open up our beans, give them a quick rinse, and then we'll transfer them into a pot where they'll hang out and soak until tomorrow morning. Fairly well rinsed. Transfer them into a cooking pot. And when we fill this, we want to make sure it's full and they have about an inch of water over them. And there we go. We'll cover and we'll see these tomorrow. These beans soaked for about 24 hours. They absorbed most of the liquid. You can see there's a little bit left in the bottom of the pot, but these will need to boil now for about an hour. So what I'm going to do is add just a bit of water so that they're covered again. Pop the top on. And these will boil for 1 hour until the skins start to break. Update. I have transferred the beans into a larger pot. This one kept boiling over. It was making a huge mess of my stove. So I gave them a lot more room. Just been stirring them every few minutes to make sure nothing sticks to the bottom. And they have about a half an hour left to go until they get nice and soft, and we can start adding our seasonings. Beans have finished boiling. We got the skins breaking nicely for us, so we know they're ready and soft. Next, I'm going to preheat the oven to 300 degrees. And we'll move on to seasoning. To start, we are going to combine our salt, mustard, and molasses in a small bowl of some kind. So first, I need 2 tablespoons of molasses. I need a ½ teaspoon of our dry ground mustard. I need 1/4 to a ½ teaspoon of salt. I'm going to use 1/4. A bit of the liquid from our beans. Hot liquid will help these seasonings to combine. We get all of this into our pot of beans. All those flavors in there. And next we will prepare our salt pork. This is a 12-ounce block of salt pork. We really only need about 4 to 6 ounces, so I'm going to cut this in half. Try to anyway. A better knife for this. And we have this. Next thing you want to do is cross-hatch this fat. So you want to cut some lines across it. Nice. Cross-hatched. Get some great flavor out of this. And now I am going to chop up an onion. So our add-ins are ready to go. Now we're going to mix it all together, and as soon as the oven's ready, we'll get it in. Now we're going to get all our pieces of this recipe together in our bean crock. So I'm going to take a big ladle because I'm not sure how much it'll hold. And just start getting the beans from my cooking pot into the crock. Sneak my onion quarters in there. Cover them up. I'm going to get my salt pork in. We're going to bury it. You may need to add liquid and check on them just so they doesn't cook off too much while they're in the oven for their long haul. So they're all ready to go, and we'll get them into the oven for the next 6 hours. I put the top on the bean crock. The oven is preheated at 350. They're in the center of the oven, and on the rack below, I've just placed a drip pan in case anything bubbles over, help prevent mess. So we will close this up and check on these every once in a while, but we'll see these in about 6 hours. All right, so our beans have been in the oven all day. I'm about to shut it off, take them out, and take a look. They smell amazing. Let's see how they look. Ooh, they have that nice caramelized top, so we know everything has cooked together really beautifully. Give them a stir. Remember, we'll need to remove those onions and that big chunk of salt pork. Probably be easier once I'm transferring it to another container. They smell fantastic, and once they've cooled a little bit, we'll give them a taste. Any pieces of the salt pork that I'm finding, I'm just putting into a separate dish. I'm taking out the pieces of onion as well. Get some nice flavor, leaving some of that salt pork in there. Oh, they look fantastic. I think I got as much out of here as I can. Set this aside to cool, and we'll taste it in a bit.